Welcome to my kitchen and the first episode of Nana's Buns. Today I'll be demonstrating how to make yeast bread in the bread cloche. First thing I do is put the bottom of the bread cloche into a cold oven. Turn the oven on 350. We're good to go. The recipe calls for around 4.5 cups of flour. So I start with a little over 3 cups of the raw wheat berries. This is hard wheat. Hard wheat is best for yeast flour because it's a little bit higher in gluten than the soft white wheat. 3 cups or a little more in there. So here's our ground flour. Begin by stirring it up a little bit, and then I start following that recipe, and I level it just because that works for me. Throw it in there, and then you've got the dry ingredients. What I do, so I won't get mixed up, is I keep them all lined up here. Yeast, and I transfer everything once it goes in. I know myself too well. The yeast, make sure that's in there, it won't rise without the yeast. That goes over there. 2 tablespoons of sunflower lecithin. This helps with rising. And it's also very nutritious. Putting in the flaxseed, what I do is I buy the yellow flaxseed because it's lighter, it just tastes better to me. And then I grind it up in a separate coffee grinder. I've started adding shelled hemp seeds also. The flax helps with the rising, the hemp seeds help with the rising. I'm out of the hemp seeds. So we're doing it without that today. And this is just my little system here. I had to change up my original recipe to make it fit in the bread cloche, but this makes a smaller amount than I was making before with the old recipe. So those are my dry ingredients. Then I move over here to the sink. I start with 1 egg. There you are. Where are you? 1 egg. Maybe I'll just do this here. And I'm going to go ahead and start heating up my water a little bit because water's going to go in there. Put that in there. This is when I add my salt because sometimes if the salt and yeast get too close together, it'll keep the yeast from rising. But you don't want to forget your salt. This is very important in the recipe. 2 teaspoons of salt. I keep looking at my recipe because it's different than the one I've made for a long time. So there goes the salt. Next is the oil. I use coconut oil, and I heated mine up in the microwave so it would come out easier. I'm using 2 ounces of any kind of light oil. I don't like the flavor. Some people use olive oil, and that's good too. And this is my little trick, and you maybe already know this one. There's oil all over this cup. It helps get the honey out. I'm using 1/2 cup of honey in mine today. I like to make my bread a little bit sweeter, and I do that with honey. That's ready. It's okay to lick your finger. And I've kind of experimented with the amount of water. Today I'm using 11.5 ounces of very warm water. It shouldn't be steaming, it shouldn't be too hot. You should be able to touch it. It's got to be warm enough to make the yeast grow. Now on the water. Stir that. And then the fun part, I'll start adding my dry ingredients. And this is all going to go in Uh-oh, I just added plain flour, but that's okay. It's all good. I'm gonna use up all this anyway. So there goes, one. This is what happens when you mess with your system. Normally that would have been the flour I added at the end to do the kneading, but it's hopefully still gonna work. Then I'll just put the rest of that in. Something I learned at Bread Becker's is if you'll just barely get this stirred in and let it sit for about 10 minutes, it helps stretch the gluten. So let me get that in there. Then I'm gonna set my timer for 10 minutes and start cleaning up a little bit. The timer's about to go off. Turn that off. That just keeps me regulated. I know what I'm doing. So as maybe you can see, there's a little bit of rising that already happened, and I haven't even started with the stirring or anything. So I'll just stir this the way it is. Now you would add a little more flour at this point, but as you remember, I've already added the extra flour. So I'm gonna stir this. I usually stir about 100 strokes, maybe 150. I just keep on going until I really can't stir anymore. I think that's good. That's 150 strokes there. Now, I've got some extra flour in here that we didn't use up. So let me add a little bit more here. And as I said, you would be adding probably more than that at this point. I can barely stir this flour in. This is when I usually move over to this counter. And I learned this from a friend of mine, Miss Miller. I spray my counter first. I think I'm gonna need the rest of that flour, so I'm just gonna pour it out there. I mean, I may not use it all. I'll just spread it out right there. Pour in my bread mixture. Now I use these little scrapers for everything. Pampered Chef. Scrape out my bowl. And now comes the kneading. Most people, in fact, almost everyone I know, uses a mixer, a special mixer for their bread. I like doing it by hand. I feel like it is good for the muscles to do the kneading yourself. So I'll knead about 100 times. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes wheat has more or less moisture. And so it's not always exactly the same. I think that's one of the things that's fun about yeast bread is you learn how to do it by feel. This is a wet day today. It's raining, and sometimes the bread doesn't rise quite as well on a moist day. So we'll see what happens, although I will say that's the advantage of the bread cloche. So right now, this is how the bread looks, bread dough. For the bread cloche, I've learned something fun to do. I have one of these scrapers. I cut the dough into 4 parts. I make 4 small loaves. You don't have to. You can put this entire loaf in if you want to. With the bread cloche, the thing I love about it is you don't have to have all the risings. Normally, this would have to rise for an hour or so. And then you make it out, and then it has to rise in the pans for an hour or so. We're eliminating all of that and letting it do all of the rising and the baking in the bread cloche. Now, I've got these 4 loaves. I think I'm going to do something a little different with 2 of them. I'm going to sprinkle a little water on these 2. And maybe put some seeds on top. I'll be back. One there on the top. That one and that one. Now this is another little trick that I learned from Sue Becker to help the rising. I'm gonna give that 10 minutes before I put it in the bread cloche. This is after 10 minutes of just sitting on the counter for 10 minutes. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and it's one of the things I love so much about the bread cloche, this is not needed. We don't have to spray a thing. Now it's time to put the bread on the bottom of the bread cloche. I will use this, something like this. You can leave it in there and put the bread on that way and then add the lid, but just to show, I'm going to show you, this is very hot, very hot. Put that there. Put the lows on. Back to the oven. Right in the center, and I keep my gloves oven mitts on just because you never know with me. Leave it in there for 45 minutes. Coming out, remember this is really hot. Now, I love this new thing that I learned about. Instant read thermometer. The bread should be, I found this out, between 190 and 200, degrees. That'll be, let me slice into, let's check it out. 200. And this is a huge no-no. Don't slice right into the bread. As tempting as that is, you should give it about 10 minutes before you take it off and slice it. But I can't wait. So we're gonna go ahead and slice into one of these. And let me just show you how amazing this bread is. There it is. Yum. Thanks for watching the show. See you next time.